I'm Kefentse Mandisa, and I'd like to thank you for joining me for the first edition of my Risk Talk podcast. So, Risk Talk is a podcast that discusses managing the risk that can damage an organization or make it become insolvent or bankrupt. And the goal is to provide information that can help an organization reduce their risk, which will increase the chances of success and them hitting their goals. And for my first podcast, I am honored to have Grysko from, from Bohn, a law firm out of Livonia, Michigan, to discuss the employment issues that organizations are facing during this pandemic. Brandon is very knowledgeable, and we had a great conversation that I'm eager to share with you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Well, first, let me have Brandon Grysko introduce himself and tell the people where you're from.
Hey, Kay, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Like Kay said, I'm Brandon Grysko from the law firm Fausone, Bohn. We're a business law firm in Western Wayne County serving clients throughout Michigan. And I focus my representation primarily on business owners, human resources professionals, and labor relations professionals in matters of business, labor and employment, HR counseling, and things like that.
So that's huge. So what are you seeing now in this industry with COVID-19? How has it changed, or what issues are you seeing from your clients?
Well, a lot of clients are having questions, and I just actually did a video on this yesterday that hopefully will be ready for posting soon. But one of the things that people have been talking a lot about is this mask thing. So that's been a big issue. Just keeping employees feeling safe while also keeping customers hopefully feeling safe. Because if people don't feel safe, A, they won't show up to work, or B, if they're a customer, they're not going to show up to purchase your product or avail themselves of your services. So I think it's just been about making people feel comfortable and safe to want to do those things.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And one of the ways that I tell my clients to feel comfortable, to make their clients and their employees feel comfortable and safe, is just having a set written down guidelines and policies, procedures for COVID and managing the risk that's involved. Because if you say, hey, we're going to guarantee people wear masks or 6 feet apart, or you're testing people every so often, and we work in different shifts and we clean, every so often, but you have to have set defined guidelines and follow them, because it could be held against you in court if you don't have them. You could be held negligent. Is that what you're saying, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think two things that you mentioned were really, really important there. And one was having something in writing. And yes, it could be used either for or against you in court as a document. But really important also, if just from a practical standpoint, before you even get to litigation, it's important to have this stuff in writing so that maybe a frontline supervisor or manager, who maybe he didn't write the policy himself. Maybe you had somebody in HR or legal write the policy, but they need something to reference to know, okay, we've had an exposure incident or a potential exposure incident. What do I do? To have that as reference material for employees, managers, supervisors, to be able to go and reference that and determine what their obligations are or what the best practices for that particular situation are. And the other thing you mentioned that was really important, other than just having it in writing, was actually doing what you said you were going to do. It only does you so much good to have something in writing. And then if you're called in for a deposition to say, okay, well, so your policy says this, right? Yeah, okay, it says that. Well, did you do that? No. You know what I mean? So I think for purposes of risk management, having the policy is great. Following the policy is even better.
Exactly. So now that some states and some industries are bringing workers back in, I foresee a risk of some employees being brought in and others not. So why did you bring in Brandon and not Kefentse? Oh, maybe discrimination, or they may claim discrimination, right? Or why did you pay someone a severance but not someone else a severance? Could be discrimination. So are you seeing, or do you foresee any of this, or am I just worrying about something that may never happen?
No, I mean, it is a concern. And I think as the employer, you have to recognize that anytime you're making a decision that could be adversely impacting one group over another group or one employee over another employee, there's some risk involved in that.
Mhm.
Anytime you terminate somebody, there's some risk. right? Whether the person is maybe a minority race, ethnicity,
Mhm.
female versus male,
Mhm.
or even if you have somebody that's not in a minority or protected classification, there's still some risk that there could be some allegations of some type of improper conduct there. So I think as the employer, the important thing is to minimize that risk. It's quite simply by documenting decisions, right? So if you were to terminate somebody that was part of a protected classification, having reasons as to why that person was terminated, or having reasons as to why one person was brought back to work versus another person, I think is really important. And these things can be documented pretty much in the natural course of things, whether it's from an email or an internal memo, or potentially in some cases maybe even a letter to the employee that explains what's going on. I think it's just really important to have that communication, both internal and with the employee, to explain things so that there's, hopefully minimize the potential hard feelings. But as employers, we have to recognize that there is some risk involved in any type of employment decision we're going to make. We're not going to eliminate that risk. It's impossible. So you can't make decisions based on, oh, well, we might get sued for this.
Mhm. Mhm.
You have to make your decisions based on what makes business sense and be able to back that up potentially later on in court and hopefully with documentation.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Especially being able to back that up because you're right. You can't make decisions based off of that, and you don't want to, right? Because you want to make decisions best for the company. But like you said, do have to show that because I think now with COVID, I think it's going to be a lot more litigation, especially around this issue, especially if people feel like they're not being compensated in a time where it's tough, where they may not have enough funds, so they're going to try to recoup that however they can. And
Absolutely. We've
unfortunately,
already seen
that may be hard.
situations where folks that were already on layoff, now they haven't been brought back to work. And is it because of my disability or my other protected
Mm,
classification? Or is
mhm.
it because of, you legitimately laid me off? And I think that's going to be a big issue going forward in terms of bringing people back from layoff versus completely separating at that point.
Yeah, and this is, uh, I haven't seen too many yet, but I foresee this maybe being an issue, and I want to get your opinion on this, is retaliation claims, or for whistleblower claims in retaliation for the whistleblowing. And whistleblower, I mean, hey, my company, they're not following the state guidelines. My company, they, disregarding the safety of their employees and their clients. And if you were to do that, come out to the news and say, hey, this Amazon plant isn't doing this, or hey, this, Joe Smo Shack isn't doing that, and then you may get retaliation from the employer because of that. Is that something that you're seeing, or you think that that may be an issue, or?
Personally, haven't necessarily seen that yet. Of course, it could be an issue anytime you have a situation where you have government regulations and things like that, especially with all the OSHA compliance requirements and things of that nature. During the COVID-19 times, I think there is a risk of potentially employees making complaints to OSHA
Mm-hmm.
or making complaints to potentially the Michigan Department of Civil Rights or maybe the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Those are things that employees have the right to do. As the employer, you really can't restrain or restrict their rights to do those things because they're guaranteed by the law. And so, to the extent that you do something adverse to somebody that maybe has made an administrative type complaint, you certainly could be exposed to liability in one form or another, potentially for retaliation or maybe even a whistleblower type claim. So I think the important thing is that this is really only going to arise in a situation where you've taken an adverse action against somebody. So I think it's just important to note that, hey, if we don't know that somebody's made a complaint, and we happen to take an adverse action against them, then, I don't, of course, you could always get sued, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's,
Mm-hmm.
universal.
Mm-hmm.
But how is that lawsuit going to hold up? So I think it depends on what the employer knows and how they've documented whatever decisions that they've made to make it clear, that, hey, if we did something to somebody, maybe we fired them or suspended them for whatever reason, that it was related to incident A, B, or C, and not related to the fact that you made an EOC complaint or a OSHA complaint.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I also will say that companies need to go over their whistleblower procedures and complaints now and share it with their employees to make sure we're on the same page. So just like you said, you can have a policy procedure, but one, if you haven't reviewed it in years or don't follow it and employees don't even know where it's at, then it's not, it may not hold that the same weight. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, employers, businesses, they need to dust these things off every once in a while, and make sure that, hey, is what we're doing in line with what our policy is? And if we're doing something different than what our policy says, does it make sense to talk, with the stakeholders here and figure out, do we need to change the policy or do we need to change our behavior?
So it sounds like what we're talking about overall, it kind of leads back to having the right policies, procedures, documenting those policies, procedures, and actually following those policies and procedures to the end. Is that is that pretty accurate?
It, it's important. I mean, it's really important. Again, if you have it in place, good on you. If you follow it, even better. And you need to be able to back that up in the event of potential future litigation. You should be able to back up that you had a policy, you did training on it, and you followed your policies.
And I hate to, I think maybe being a dead horse, but um, it's very important. But also, not only is very important, I think that's why you work with a person like a Brandon and Grysko. They can come in and help you determine those policies and procedures, or even if it isn't you, a firm similar to yours, a person can come in, have that professional set of eyes to look over and make sure that we are minimizing that risk, right? Because you know minimizing risk, a lot of times people just think of insurance, but minimizing risk is can be done for so many different professions, so many different ways, by so many different partners that you may partner with. And I think, Brandon, you're a great way to help companies minimize that risk.
Absolutely. I mean, insurance is a big part of it. HR compliance is a big part of it. Legal is a big part of it. So when it comes to minimizing risk, there are multiple components, and I think that a well-rounded business that tries to mitigate its risk effectively is going to evaluate all those different areas of whether it's HR, legal type risk, insurance risk, or operational risk through the use of effective workplace practices and things like that.
Thank you, Brandon, for joining us for Risk Talk. I really appreciate all your expertise and the knowledge you're able to give to myself and also the viewers. But where can people find you at? Where can they reach you?
Hey, thanks, Kay. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here. Really grateful for the opportunity to talk with some of your viewers about this issue. Anybody that's interested can reach out to us at 248-380-0000 or check us out on the web at fb-firm.com. That's FB like Frank Boy -firm.com.